Welcome to the weekly open mic. Hey, Tim. We do this call for you folks. MSPs asked us to have a call where you folks get to hear what we're working on with the platform, what's new, what bugs we fixed, and you wanted to do a little R&D or rob and duplicate from your MSP peers on what they're building. A couple reminders. My favorite announcement, I know of 2, 8, 12, 20, 0 MSPs that have ever succeeded with automation that never asked a question. So use Discord. Feel free to ask any question in the public channels like the Goop. If you think your question's too sensitive or you don't want everyone seeing it, feel free to use your private Discord, but I guarantee you will be at least 10.3 times more successful if you ask questions constantly when it comes to automations. With that, another reminder, Flow. Can someone put up the registration link? When is early bird over? Can someone speak to that?
March 31st.
All right. Early bird's over March 31st. We're sold out on sponsorships, and registrations are almost 3 times higher than last year at this time. So buy your tickets early and often. Also, I'm going to share my screen here. Share. We are now celebrating across all Rewst environments, US, UK, EU, and AU, 100% uptime for the past 30 days. Not a minute down. This is a very big deal for us. In a lot of cases, we're processing thousands of automation messages or tasks per second. And being able to do this is great. One of the big reasons is the Teams implementation of RabbitMQ. So thank you, everybody, especially the folks behind the RabbitMQ implementation. It was a big lift, a big risk, but it paid off in the long run. We want to keep this uptime at 100% going as long as possible. It almost feels like when you're at the job site and they say there's a number of days since the last accident, right? We're 30 days without the last accident, so that's awesome. With that, if you're interacting with us in Discord, make sure you tag us or make sure you respond in a thread so that the person that you're talking to in Discord, who is likely monitoring hundreds of other channels, know you're responding to them. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Ashe.
Thank you, Aaron. All right, so now we are going to jump over to our second favorite Canadian. I'll let you decide who the first is. Daniel with an A for our dev and product updates.
Well, we all know that our least favorite is Jesse Hildebrand, so whatever from there doesn't really matter. All right, a few updates for today. We have some new features. I'm also going to talk about a couple things that we're testing out, and hopefully they resonate well and you find some value in them. But first off, we've improved the error messaging of Jinja trigger criteria. So you may have noticed if you had any trigger criteria that use Jinja to evaluate the incoming trigger, you'd get like a wall of text. We've improved that. We've shortened the error message so it's a lot more concise. We've also added persistent sorting of app builder data tables. So if you're using app builder and you have data being returned in a data table and you sort it and then reload the page, that will actually persist now. We have a few bug fixes and chores that have come out. We've started work on syncing of custom app builder components. So within app builder, you can create custom components. Let's say it's a header or a footer. And if you make a change to that header, you want that change to apply across all of your different app builder pages that you have. So we've started the work on the prerequisite work for app builder syncing of custom components. We've moved crate publishing processing from agents that affected workflow processing. So by doing that, crate publishing is like quite a heavy task for us, and that will actually remove some of the burden from the workflow processing agents. We've fixed configuration in some of our error tracking tools that we use to figure out, hey, what are the most common errors that people are seeing. We've added some improvements to the SonicWall NSM generic action. There were some false positives, so an item would come back as failing, but it was actually succeeding. And then some action options within new super ops integrations were not working, so we made some fixes to those. We have some really exciting stuff coming soon. Not everything is in this list. Hopefully, well, I think we're seeing a lot of success with this one. So hopefully we get this moved out to some more test users. If you're ever looking to test some stuff like the items you're seeing in the coming soon section, please reach out to us through Discord. Myself or any of the members of the product.
I think your audio is dropping.
Yeah, there's an audio issue. We're missing parts of what you're saying.
Sorry, I
we're
think
in the best parts. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
You're
Sorry.
starting to get better now. Yeah.
Yeah, I took off my headset. So if you're ever looking to test any of these items, please reach out to us through Discord or any of the other channels to get some access to this. We have improved workflow page and workflow results page search and filtering coming soon, as well as a new workflow executions dashboard widget that will be released shortly. This will give you information on what workflows are running the most for you, which ones are saving time the most for you, and some other data. So I'll show a couple of one interesting smaller quality of life feature that will hopefully help you out. So you can see here I have my workflow list page. Within that, I see that I have a workflow that has 2 triggers. Well, now if I hover over this is actually, we're testing this and it should be released shortly. I would imagine within the next week or so. When you hover over this, you can see the 2 triggers that are applied to this. So you have a chat message subscription trigger and you have an always pass trigger. So if I turn this one on, you can see, okay, there was no errors found. If I turn this one on, you can see, oh, there was an error found in this trigger. So what happens when I go to that workflow? If I open it up and I open my fail trigger here, what I'll see is I actually don't have the graph integration installed in this organization, so there's an error detected. So it's just easier or better insight into your triggers, what's on and off, and you can manipulate that faster. One other really small bug fix I don't think we showed last week, but I had a lot of people sending messages about is the action bar is once again, I should say, resizable. So this was stuck for a while at a certain size, and it was sometimes difficult to read longer action names, and we've since improved that. But that's all I have for today. So back to you, Ashley.
Hey, Daniel, you're getting questioned in chat, and I feel the same way. People are asking about PowerShell, and they're wondering why you haven't released it yet.
Well, I think we should now, I think Ian has a good point that we should call it shower gel from now on, first off. But the good news is, so it should be coming sooner rather than later. The update is, and again, we have a couple other improvements related to just the design and user experience of it that we want to make sure is completely ironed out. But we just had the PowerShell pull request merged. It will be behind a feature flag in our next release. And so what we're going to be doing is some internal testing before we release to anybody. But once again, people are asking about shower gel, PowerShell, whatever we want to call it. what that does is for those who haven't seen the demo of it or haven't heard of the bounty that we had, it pretty much creates interoperability between Jinja and PowerShell. So wherever you use Jinja within Rewst, you'll have the ability to use PowerShell. That hopefully means there'll be a lower learning curve for those who are familiar with PowerShell coming into Rewst. So yeah, that's kind of the state of it. It won't be released to the public next week, but it's getting a lot closer, and we'll have code in production for that PowerShell interoperability.
Yeah, and if it does get into the product next week behind a feature flag, we will likely on this call on Friday ask for some testers who want it turned on to provide feedback.
We'll start the bidding at $100. Do I hear $100?
What, you'll pay us $100? I'll say I'll sign up.
At this point, yeah.
All right, thank you, Daniel. So now we do not have a marketplace update today, but we will be jumping over to, where's my list? We're jumping over to Brandon. He's got our education update and also a sneak peek on something that they've been putting together for everyone.
Hey everyone, can you guys hear me? All right, I get to be the one that makes people nervous today and show some things off, so this will be interesting. All right, let me share my screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Okay, awesome. First of all, game tip of the week. I know I've been talking about it a lot, but Xenoblade Chronicles X just came out. If you don't know what that is, play Xenoblade. This is one of the greatest series of all time, and y'all should get it for the Switch. It's only on the Switch, so for those of you who are, Nintendo haters, or maybe not Nintendo haters, but just, you don't have a Switch. They're also really cheap. Switch 2 is coming out. Play Xenoblade. That's all I gotta say. It'll change your life, all right? Xenoblade 1, 2, 3, X. Just go all in. Treat them like the only games you'll ever play because they each run, I don't know, 100 hours each. So you guys all have free time because of all this automation you're building. So get to Xenoblade. That's my game tip of the week. All right. Otherwise, and more importantly, shout outs to Kurt, Alex, Casey, Charles, Doug, Luke, and Brian for passing the foundation certification. You guys will get your certified rooster badge in Discord and access to our not so secret Discord channel where you can chat with other certified folks and continue to build awesome things and share with one another. And shout outs to Philip, Blake, and Ethan for passing the clean automation certification as well. Again, I say this every week, but for anybody here who may be new, if you have not taken the clean automation course, I would highly recommend it. We have been hearing time and time again from customers that after going through foundations, when they went through clean automation, we've heard things like, if we had this when we first started, it would have completely changed the game for us. So no pun intended. So check that one out, go get certified, and it's going to be great. And let us know if you guys have any feedbacks or if there are any other topics that you'd like to take a look at as well. Otherwise, coming down here, we have a new training schedule that is live on calendly.com/clucku. We are offering the automation basics. We will be offering the Rewst Foundation series weekly with a focus on Jinja and troubleshooting, because those questions have come up a lot. And those will be led by the legendary Eddie Chow, who is not here to be humble and tell me that he's not legendary, because he is. Any chance anybody gets, if you can just tell Eddie he's legendary. If you see him at MSP GeekCon or anything like that, just walk up to Eddie, shake his hand, and tell him how legendary he is, and he's going to love it, even if he seems like he doesn't. He really does. Otherwise, clean automation is going to be now offered once a month as a boot camp, and we have all of those self-serve for you as well. And speaking of self-serve, before I continue any further, I'm gonna leak something here in classic Aaron style. We may or may not be working on something special for y'all to be looking at here. It's not rolled out yet, but we have started working on an LMS to get all of this stuff in there as well. That will include all of our courses self-serve as well as some of our live courses as well. So look forward to more about this. And, like I said, get certified. So more to come, but we're very, very excited about this one, and we will give you more in the coming days. All right, other than that, I'm going to jump down here to some of our updates. So we've been doing a lot of work with documentation. There's a lot of stuff in the works. We'll continue to build this stuff out. But for this week, some of the highlights or the updates we wanted to highlight are that we've updated the documentation on our form builder, including better guidance for each of the form field options. We've added docs for how to troubleshoot or prepare support tickets for forms, unpacked from crates that won't populate. We've added some documentation on the dual managed forms crate. We have added the getting started with app builder, or I should say we've edited the getting started with app builder to be an easier to use guide in one page. So we're doing some consolidation to make it easier for you guys to find and use our docs. We've added the bulk create client from PSA create documentation and how to find your Rewst instance region docs as well. So like I said, got a lot of stuff going, more to come. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the chat, and we're excited about some of the new features we're rolling out. Back to you, Ashe.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon. Looking to see if there were any questions. Mostly just hype for Eddie at MSP GeekCon too. That's a lot of hype for that. That's gonna be awesome. Now, before we move on to the demo side of our business, we will jump over to George, who has our community update for us today.
Hey everyone, just a quick reminder from me about our workflow forum on Discord. So on this call, we see lots of people sharing really cool workflows and sub-workflows and different things that they've built. If that's something that you want to make available to other people and share with the community, the best spot to put that in is the workflow forum on Discord. So let me just share my screen really quick. You can see here in our Discord under support channels, workflow forum, and this is also a great place for people to come and check out if you're kind of thinking about building something, looking for inspiration. You can come in and see, some of our key community members, Brian, John, who and Calvin as well, who did the great P1 licensing one a few weeks ago, and most recently, Tim Hunt this week posted a workflow here about Duo new user enrollment. So first of all, thanks to everyone who's sharing those in here, and if you have any things that you want to pop in, just come on in and create a new post. And that's it for me. So let's make more use of that channel. Thanks so much.
Thank you, George. And yes, thank you to everybody who shows off things and gives out things. And that's kind of what I want to kick off some of these next parts with. And so really, like, one of the things that I've been talking about so much over the past several months when I'm talking to people, trying to get them to demo, trying to find those interesting things is really about the it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be beautiful, fully designed, but I also recognize even from my own perspective, when I'm showing something off, I don't want people to think, oh, this is all I'm capable of, or this is all I've gotten so far. But the value of progress of learning, and sometimes it's okay to be really, really excited about really, really simple things, and I am all the time. And so I guess I just wanted to start by showing the very first workflow that I ever made that I was really pleased and proud of. And then I'm going to go into the next quick tip that was kind of that pivotal moment for me of easy ways to get things done through the ability to do my webhook, super quick workflow. So I'm just going to share right now my window. This is so embarrassing. All right. So this is in the MSP Geek instance because I didn't even work at Rewst yet. I was just playing with the tool and I was trying to figure it out. And I was like, how does this work? And, if he manages to get on, I know he had another call, but Mendy is going to kind of capstone this on the other end with something that he's been doing. But I had familiarity with calling an API, and I had familiarity with using tools, but like really where it was like, how do I enable simple functionality that I didn't have before? And so like one of those was like, how can I trigger something to happen based off of other information? I was like, okay, a super quick example would be a form. So I was like, all right, I'm going to create a form, and it's going to take a company name, and it's going to let me choose whether I think that they're cool or not. And by the way, I can't see the chat, so don't be mean to me, guys. If you're making fun of me, please don't. So I was like, yeah, I'll give this a try. So like, all I did to start with was I just had the form. I didn't have it connected to anything. But I was like, Rewst, are they cool? Yes. And then I wanted it to submit. And then if it submitted, I wanted to send an email. And then if I didn't, then I didn't want to send an email. And that was my use case. And so all I did, like the biggest gap that I had, like I knew how to make the form, I knew how to make the workflow that had a confirmation email on it, but I didn't know how to connect them. I didn't know what that was. And this is something that we've talked about so much, and that we've kind of breezed over so much in the past few years because of how much has been talked about, but like, it's good to bring these things back up every once in a while. And so like, I didn't know anything about how I was configuring stuff. So there's all kinds of, I had to go looking for this. I mean, it took me it was like over 2 years ago, almost three, yeah. Yeah, so I put a condition in here. That was something I'm like, I understand conditions. And so I'm like, the cool checkbox that I have here, I want it to only pass through when that's the case. And that was the only condition I said. I selected the form and I turned it on. I didn't understand how variables pass through. I had to figure that out. So I actually ended up naming this the same thing as what was coming through. This is, don't do this. But I knew that the company name was the thing that I wanted. And so I figured out I figured out what it looked like when I submitted it in the payload. And I just put that there. And so I was like, yeah, okay, so MSP Geek, are they cool? Submit. And I was like, there's things that are hard coded in here. My email address is hard coded. And it's just the one like that's not really properly defined. But then that will probably come through here in a moment. But this is the email that I tested with, and I'm in my wrong email again. Anyways, it pops through and it says, good news. The results are in. You have successfully determined that this company is cool. That was the very first, very first. I'm going to switch tabs because I'm logged in with a different account here. It was the very first value that I saw with Rewst was literally just like, hey, can I make something dynamic that I can call from somewhere else that does a different thing? And I didn't focus on anything else, and I did that, and it was cool. So now the next thing on that similar front, and this is where I'm actually going to get Tim to jump in with the conversation a little bit. But two things that that we did early on that I realized that like Rewst could help us with, especially with webhooks and being able to call a webhook with a query parameter at the end of it. And so if I can have like a webhook coming from a different source, like for example, Pendo, or from a different website, and it has a query parameter, it can then basically do whatever I want in the workflow by using those things as variables. So I had this, and this is actually like another bad example of don't do this, because I just grouped another need onto an existing workflow that did something similar. And so then when I went to go look for this one, it wasn't very easy to find, but it's so simple that it's just kind of been working in the background here. So literally all this is I have 2 different webhooks. One of them is just a variable to do the, to just return a variable back from a different place that I'm hard coding something in. And then the other one is the open mic link that many of you use to get your invite in your mail. And that was a whole urgent issue that we had in like April of 2023, where we needed to fix this, the way that the emails were going out. And so I kind of put my head together with Tim and with Kelvin, and we kind of figured out this solution. And the one really cool thing that Tim helped me do was use the webhook to generate an ICS file. And all we had to do was configure that here. So Tim, can you jump in and kind of explain how that works?
Yeah. So trying to remember how we exactly made the ICS. I think we just did a calendar invite and just grabbed the email content from it and threw it in here. But if you click the little code button, you see that there is just a calendar invite here. And luckily we haven't had to move the open mic or anything for the past couple of years. So the data is all still valid. The ideal thing here would be store this in a template rather than in the trigger itself so that it's easier to read and see. But again, we did this 2-3 years ago and didn't follow the best practices back then. And then the other real thing that is important to keep in mind is the content type. So typically we're going to default to application JSON. But here we want, in the headers, we want to show that it's a downloadable link. So if we just tell it that we want to download this as an attachment, it's going to show that it's an ICS file. And then your computer, whoever downloads it, is going to have ICS, tailored to use Outlook. So Outlook will just open it up. So really simple way just to, host this content in a Rewst workflow. And if we wanted to, we could do other things with it. So the query parameters and all are visible in the workflow. So if we wanted to kick off some other workflow actions after this thing gets downloaded, we could do that. But in this case, there's not really much need to. We just have a no-op just to show that it did this. Again, old workflow that we just kind of got working like last minute and didn't do a whole lot with.
Yeah, quick win. And then like all we did was we took that webhook URL and added the query parameter for the request type equaling the open mic link. And then that passed it through to the other approach instead of the one that was originally there. So not an example of what you should do in terms of how this is all set up, but an example of like an accomplishment while figuring things out using the tool that we had. And now obviously we have to kind of come through and there's responsibility there to iterate on these things. So, on the vein of iteration, our next topic will go into that with Brian. But does anybody have any questions before we jump over? Absolutely right, Derek. All right, Brian, let's jump over to you.
Okay. All right. So I'm actually going to show off. This is a workflow that is an updated version of the very first workflow I actually showed off almost 2 years ago to the day on a Friday open mic. It was one of the very, very first workflows that I built while trying to get my head around the platform and how variables worked and how to be able to pass through things between solutions. And I kind of still wish I had V1, but I purged it a long time ago. But this is it's still a very simple workflow. I saw a big need for using Rewst to kind of manage itself in terms of inviting our client end users to the platform as forms users. I prefer giving the form straight to the client for new hires and terminations because that way it's, they're giving us exactly what they want out of it. There's no transposition errors between a ticket and the form. And I actually have one HR person at a company that likes to submit her 20 new hires a week at like 1 a.m. and they're just done for her when they show up the next morning for hiring. So one of the things that I had to do was manage how to get those users into there. Well, there's the crate that will do a security group and add it. So I took that crate and more or less modified it to exactly how I want it. So this is a fairly straightforward, fairly simple workflow that, 2 years ago, we weren't talking about sub workflow, all the things. Well, as I iterated through this, I created sub workflows to handle each of the major core steps. Although if you see, I haven't touched this workflow still in like a year. You can kind of see this still isn't exactly like best practices, right? Like the list groups is just a singular action. It's not sub work to pull it itself to handle error handling it in its own. So there's the potential for a V5 later down the road, but this is really pretty straightforward. I just make sure that the security group I care about exists. If it doesn't, say it's a new client that we just onboarded, it's going to make that group wait a little bit and then add a owner to that group so it's available for other automation purposes. Once it completes that sub workflow, it jumps into pulling some contacts from Microsoft and then from our PSA, ConnectWise Manage, does some Jinja to filter out who's in there. This one says filter out Gmail because, we all know, even though Gmail's not a business email address, somebody's going to put it in for a contact for one of our users in our PSA, despite yelling at them that it's not a contact for a business user. And then I also had to filter out, some other known domains like Yahoo and all those things out of it. And then I had to be able to tell who is and isn't in that group. And then once it does that, it then takes those users. Once it's done with that, it adds any that were missing to this security group, the Rewst Forms security group. Final step on it, then it figures out if any of the members of the group are not already invited to Rewst as Forms users and then creates an invite. It's also doing, supposed to be doing, I need to check if this is actually working, but it's supposed to be deleting the invite for any users that no longer exist in the Rewst Forms group so that if for some reason they either no longer have access or they've been offboarded, it keeps my user list clean. But this is a really good example of when I originally created this. And if you want to see the original version of it, I'll go back almost 2 years, like I said, to the original open mic where I showed this off. And it was like mostly one large monolithic workflow. There's still a whole lot here where, I'm looking at it now a year after touching it. And like I said, I'm looking at like these actions like list groups. This really should be a function app with error handling and all of its own subcomponents as part of the clean automation certification that you learn for best practices, and then really kind of abstracting out even more of it so that I can really make this resilient and teach it that way. But I thought this was a really fine example. If it's, compared to 2 years ago when I first made it, this is like night and day difference. And I can even tell you based on how much I've learned in the last year from when I last touched it, it's still so far behind of even what it could be. And I'm sure there's other things that I've looked at it that probably aren't 100%. And then like all good workflows, it ends on a failure in a ticket for myself to go take a look at and find out what it is that I messed up. And fortunately, that usually only happens when ConnectWise PSA decides to throw a random 500 error, and I still can't manage to error handle every single ConnectWise error after 3 years because they like coming up with new ones. This is an example of taking that simple early workflow and really just kind of honing in on it. I found a lot of value, especially early on I was, probably like a lot of people, especially newer folks in the crowd, getting hounded to start providing that ROI right away because your boss signed that big fat contract either directly to Rewst, or if you buy through Pax8 or however you purchase it, they're like, we need our money's worth. Well, I started finding lots of wins like this in a lot of administrative tasks in terms of turning Rewst into managing this. The very early version of this actually also did some contact cleanup in ConnectWise PSA. I think when I went to version 3, I actually figured out that it was a better way to let a different workflow entirely handle cleaning up all of our inactive users. We keep all of our interactive users in a specific contact type for easy filtering. And I actually went to an event-based trigger on that workflow that every time a contact was updated, that workflow would just kick off and check to see if it was now inactive, and remove it from any marketing groups and set it to that particular contact type, and pulled a whole chunk out of this workflow altogether. So it even was already a pretty simple workflow even less complex by moving to a smarter way to handle some of those tasks. Any questions on that? I don't think I really was intending to show necessarily the workflow, but more just the concept of, taking an early one, pulling pieces out that no longer work, and how to continue to improve on it and identify ways that you can keep improving it.
That's really awesome, Brian. So you touched on it, but like, at what point was it when you kind of went the modular approach? Was it like, how did you decide like what pieces to like pull out?
So at the point when I started doing it with this, it was, this was early in the whole community concept of workflow, all the things. And it was while I know the education team was developing the standards that would become the clean automation platform. And the way that I looked at it was turning anything that was a series of steps that was like a breakdown of the workflow. So it was like a chunk of it. I thought of it as of a sub workflow as a chunk at that point. And that was kind of the common understanding the last time I really redid this workflow, was just to take, for this one, it's make sure the group exists and make it. If it doesn't, well, that's a chunk. That's like step 1. Step 2 is to make sure the people are the member of that group. So I broke that into a sub workflow. Step 3 was, make sure that the people that are in that group are either invited to Rewst, or if they're no longer in that group, are removed from Rewst. So that was chunk 3. So like step 1, 2, and 3 got into that concept of a sub workflow, where I think I've continued to work on and how I commented with it. Now it's looking at even a single action should be a sub workflow and repeatable, so that with error handling and ways to safely exit out of it, so that I can then reuse that single action sub workflow with proper error handling across the board, and really just kind of honing in on that dry concept of clean automation of, if I do that and I have one function workflow that does that, then I can fix it everywhere with a couple clicks of a button, instead of having to, oh yeah, a month later, this random workflow broke again the same way the other one did, and it was the same problem, which is what I know a lot of us who've been around for a couple of years now have done a lot of doing, of chasing that same bug throughout multiple workflows.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Yep.
All right, so now, Mendy, are you on?
I am.
Awesome. So one of the few people who was like on these calls knowing more than most people have probably collectively learned when I started was Mendy, and he was solving a lot of these business problems and growing this experience with Rewst, and now it's almost like I'm not trying to like tell your story, but like it's almost like you've transcended beyond like anything that you can automate for yourself, and you're now kind of looking at how can I use this and leverage this in other areas of my life and in my involvement. And so you've been doing something pretty cool on the MSP Geek side. So I wanted to have you talk about that a bit.
Yeah, let me share my screen in a shameless pitch for MSP GeekCon. This is a group photo from last year. You all should come this year so we get in the group photo. But one of the things that I've been doing for MSP Geek on the community side is trying to get a community call going once a week. On Tuesday, I call it the MSP Geek Day because it's the day I have blocked out on my calendar to focus on MSP Geek. And I call it the MSP Geek Day Hangout. We have it at, I don't know, 2 to 3 p.m. or 3 to 4 p.m., something like that, Eastern time, depending on, I guess, the time zone and when Discord catches up with the clocks changing. But with that to say, like, one of the things that we wanted to do on the call is to arrange for some kind of agenda. And so we have this Hangouts thing that we created. This is the Halo portal, by the way. And like over the years, it's crazy. Wow, Ashley mentioned, we've basically been running into challenges like, Rewst has forms, the PSA has forms, you have another platform that has forms, like there are different things that you can do to present to your customer portal and what options that they can fill out for filling out data. And really, the question is what form would you like to use and how would we integrate that with Rewst? And so what we did is in Halo, basically we wanted to be able to present an ongoing list of things that we're going to talk about on the Hangout floor. And so this is basically on the portal, we have this web page. It's returning a list of upcoming sessions and with a date and time. And we have this button to request a place to speak on the Hangout floor, essentially. So this is the form that's coming from Halo. These details are all like native Halo. We have some automation built into Halo. It does some really cool stuff that I can go to into in a moment. And then once we submit that request, it gets logged as a ticket. And this page is actually generated from Rewst. I essentially turned Rewst into a web server, which we've seen some people do in the past. And it basically serves information out of Halo, again, using Rewst. So what we did is inside of, let me not do that. Hold on one second. Let me go into configuration first outside of the screen share, and then I'll jump back into the screen share. Where are we? Here. Okay, so this is the configuration side. So we have the self-service portal, which is configured. And there's a button that we have called the Hangouts button. It's literally a custom HTML page. And inside this HTML, we're literally just calling an iframe that's calling Rewst here. And this is not the typical Rewst form page or the app platform or anything like that. This is literally, you may notice it's just a webhook. So it's a trigger on a workflow. And if we go ahead and call it, it's literally just that page that loads the list of events. And so we have that as an iframe being displayed, and then we have a button that takes us to the Halo form itself. And the way this works is if we look at this workflow, this entire thing that we just saw is essentially these 3 actions. So step 1 is we've got 3 different triggers inside this one workflow that we then basically identify which trigger ID is being called from these conditions. And if it's just this webhook ID, which is literally the ID that you see in the URL here, then it's going to present nothing. There's no output. There's nothing here. And what happens is on the actual trigger, we basically have a template that gets presented. And so then if we go jump into the template, don't do that. Automations, templates. What happens is the HTML has JavaScript built in. which then calls another webhook, which is another trigger on the same workflow. So we're presenting, if you go back to the workflow and look at the other trigger, we then grab the fake API call essentially, which runs through and grabs the upcoming speakers from the Halo database. It just pulls in the ticket details of the upcoming speakers that have been approved. Once it has that, it literally just outputs it into a structure that gets parsed by the HTML here in the JavaScript. And then it outputs that into what we see here. The other thing that we do though is because we essentially have, when we go to the form and we request a hangout, we're basically picking a time slot as to which Tuesday we want that to happen on, right? And then when we do that, we're basically selecting like 30 minutes or whatever. This is not like a real calendar entry. So we don't have anything that's doing a calendar reminder. And we've actually, like this is live, we actually had some speakers request to present and then miss the call because it's not on their calendar. So on the last call or 2 calls ago, what I did was we added this step over here where in the event, the ticket gets approved as like if they get approved to speak on Tuesday, then it runs another webhook, which is sending an appointment. And it literally just goes from Rewst, it hits Rewst. Rewst will basically build out based off of the ticket details, what appointment should go out. And then it creates that appointment in Halo, emailing out to the speaker a reminder of that appointment. So it sends out like a calendar reminder to the speaker at that point. All this stuff is basically happening between native built-in automation in Halo with external automation and stuff inside of Rewst to basically marry and build out a brand new interface to do things that you can't necessarily do natively inside of Halo itself. Some of the other cool things that we did here is like we have a limit as to how much time we can speak. Like the whole session is only an hour. If I try to do something like 67 minutes, we're gonna get a banner. Time slot's not allowed. Please select a time slot between 15 to 60 minutes, right? So this is not a native functionality that's available in Halo. It is using native things to do it, but it's basically hacking the interface by creating a read-only field and displaying the hint as HTML to display that banner. And the other thing that we notice is like the button is gone. We can't submit the request because the time is not allowed. And the way we did that is by, again, some automation in Halo that basically forces custom CSS into this rich text field, which hides the button. And so if I were to just steal that CSS away, the button comes back. Not that I'm showing you how to hack the form, because like I don't want you to do that, but I guess I just did. We could put that back in and it goes away. If we go down below like 45, the CSS updates to show that button. And so this is some of the cool things that we've done. Basically using concepts and creative thinking that I've learned over the years of working with Rewst and being challenged to think outside the box, we were able to utilize a lot of that to apply to another platform, like you saw just now with Halo, and then even ways that we can connect Rewst and Halo together to make all that work. So, any questions?
Thank you, Mendy. Yes, please, if you have questions. I also posed a question in the chat, reflecting on the fact that we've gone from immediate value down to like crazy unlocking of power potential. Where's everyone fitting? Where's the questions? Where are you thinking in terms of like what type of stuff you want to be seeing?
Give a bit of time and I could probably come up with 1,000 things. It really is. It's like I say, as somebody new to Rewst and getting more into the automation and learning this stuff. It's like there's literally nothing that we can't do. It's just figuring it. It's just figuring out what the method is to do it. Everything's possible. Just somebody has to figure out what it is that you got to do it.
The dream machine. You need to be a dreamer.
So,
And logic.
so that's what when I see MSPs go from 0 to 100, that's the two things that happens. One thing is they realize that they can do anything is number one. And then number two, they realize that coming up with the automation idea is usually more difficult than the implementation of the automation.
And thinking it through step by step instead of rushing right to the end. That's the hardest
Rushing
part.
is what usually, well, the hardest part is not rushing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what people do. You try to get into it and try to too much. Like I'll be honest, like I've had to hold myself back on it. And even then sometimes I'm trying to get a bit too ambitious and ahead of myself, because it's very hard not to get ahead of yourself, especially once you see what can be done and what you want to do. You have to recognize if you're actually, well, is this something I can actually do right now or not? But you want to do it. So you jump in a lot deeper than what your abilities allow. And that's a danger.
Did anybody notice the similar pathway that the initial open mic quick win ICS solution, and how it could potentially branch out and become when thought about exactly what Mendy just built? Where'd you get your inspiration from, Mendy?
The ROC call.
Takes intention. You can start with something, and that something can get you where you need to go, but you have to intentionally plan your next steps and your progress. And sometimes building upon what you've built before or what others before you have built can help you exponentially get there.
And you have to accept that working and good enough is sometimes enough to keep going, right? Don't end up like me with such a grand vision that you never get anywhere, right? So you have so many things that you want to bring together in the perfect way. Last week was a great example. I forget the woman who presented, but in the course of it, she needed 3 different outputs of the same data. What did she do? She just had 3 separate outputs on the action and just parsed it 3 times. Now, my brain doesn't even think of that initially. I'm going to waste a ton of time creating a structure that only parses it once and is now clean to just give 3 different kinds of output. And I wasted a bunch of time where I could have just bump, and Rewst can handle it. It doesn't have to be the most efficient, quote unquote, proper code. Rewst doesn't care if you're sloppy. Rewst is happy with your slop as long as it works.
As long as we can teach you how to make it more efficient after it worked.
and I would add, realizing where in the process that you want to do something that could be easier for you based on your knowledge. Because what happened with me was I was trying to, as I showed it before in my consolidation of reports, the big thing was if I tried to do that all in one output with one set of Jinja, it would have been like it ridiculous. And what made it simple for me was, you know what? Screw this. I'm barely manipulating the data at all. I'm just outputting the JSON to a SQL database, and with my knowledge of Power BI, I'm just using that to then manipulate the data and get what I want. And hey, yes, it could have all been done in Rewst, but at least in my case, it was easier for me this way, and it was faster this way because I didn't have to do it all in Rewst first. So you got to consider where your strengths are as well to be able to do things.
Community is a matrix, a community and a product. It's a matrix of skills and abilities and what works together. And then how do we educate and enable within those things? Some people have really good skills. And I always describe to people when they're talking about Jinja or list comprehension, I'm like, it's kind of like writing in SQL. If you've never written in SQL, you don't get that. But if you have, you're like, oh, I get it now in a lot of cases, right? And so, yeah, everybody has their own way to learn. We need that Rosetta Stone, and that's what we're all here for. We're about that time, 3 minutes. Anybody have any questions, parting words?
Rod, I saw you had a demo. Ashe will take that down and we'll hit you up next Friday.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just I had something up, so I figured I'd just offer it. If you guys, if things ran short, I'd put it in. I had it up on my screen. It's not
Oh, I didn't.
big.
I missed that. Yes, no, we
I
can.
can always have something to demo. Put it this way, because I always have little things that I'm working on. So
Okay, well, it's good to know. Yeah, and I actually saw Adam, A to Z, Adam. You mentioned that you were down to show your very first workflow ever. So if you're cool on next week or another week, we can do that because that'd be a cool segment.
We love seeing new people demo. We love seeing new folks active on the call. This call isn't just for the people that you see talk every single week. We want to continue to grow our community and get more folks on here presenting. I'll kind of wrap this up. If anyone has a quick question, just drop it in the chat. Thank you, everyone who demoed. It can be stressful, so thanks for your work up front to do it. Thank you for joining the call with us, and we'll see you again next week at the same time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mendy. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone who asked questions. Bye.
Thank you.